My 16-year-old son came out, and I reacted horribly. Not because he's gay, but because it reopened a wound I buried 30 years ago when I lost my little brother to hate. It nearly broke our family, but I finally told him the truth, and we're starting to. I'm a 53-year-old dad. I have 3 kids, and this is about my middle child, my son Ethan, who's 16. He came out to me a few days ago. And I need to be honest. I didn't react well. I didn't yell or say anything hurtful, but I broke down crying. I locked myself in our bedroom for the rest of the day. I didn't know how to explain what was happening inside me. Ethan must have thought I was disappointed in him, that I couldn't accept him. But that couldn't be further from the truth. I love that boy. Fiercely. I've loved him since the moment I saw him. This tiny red-faced baby with a pair of lungs that could fill a stadium. He's bright, kind, funny. Sensitive in the way a good man should be. I've always known he was different, maybe even guessed long before he told me. But when he said it out loud, "Dad, I'm gay," I wasn't hearing Ethan in that moment. I was hearing someone else. I was hearing my little brother.
His name was Sam.
He was 2 years younger than me, and he was my best friend growing up. We were inseparable. He was the one person in the world who understood me, who always had my back, who could make me laugh until I couldn't breathe. He came out at 17 in the mid-90s when things were different, and not in a good way. People around us weren't accepting. Small-town Nebraska was not kind to boys like Sam.
Still, he came out.
Brave as hell. And I was proud of him. I stood by him when people in our own family said terrible things. I didn't flinch. I wasn't ashamed. I was scared, but I loved him too much to let him feel that. Then one night, everything changed. We were at a gas station late, just grabbing snacks. 3 guys started harassing him, calling him slurs, accusing him of looking at them weird. I saw the shift in their eyes, and I knew something bad was coming. Before I could react, they jumped him. I tried, I swear to God I tried, to get them off him. I yelled, I shoved, but they beat the hell out of him right in front of me. 2 broken ribs, teeth knocked out, twisted wrist. 3 days in the hospital, and then gone. He overdosed. Left a letter I still can't bring myself to read in full. He was 19. 19 years old, with his whole life ahead of him. And they got away with it. The cops barely looked into it. Just another gay kid in a small town. That's all they saw. So when Ethan told me, I didn't cry because I was ashamed. I cried because I remembered what happened to Sam. I remembered holding his hand in the ER. I remembered standing at his funeral, watching dirt fall on a coffin that should never have been in the ground. I cried because I love Ethan so much that the idea of him going through even a fraction of what Sam did terrifies me. It paralyzes me. That night, my brain didn't go to celebration or pride. It went straight to fear. Fear that history might repeat itself. Fear that I might not be able to protect him the way I couldn't protect my brother. The next morning, I pulled myself together. I sat Ethan down and told him everything. About Sam. About the attack. About the grief I've carried for 3 decades. I told him that my tears weren't about him, but about my fear of the world hurting someone I love again. And then I told him how proud I was. That he was brave. That I was honored he trusted me with the truth of who he is. And that I will stand by him forever. I don't want him to feel shame. I want him to feel safe. I want him to be happy, to love fully and openly in ways Sam never got the chance to. And I'll do everything I can to make that happen. I'm a 53-year-old father of 3. My middle child, my son, who I'll call Ethan here, is 16. He came out to me a few days ago. I'll never forget the moment. We were just cleaning up after dinner, and he stood there, fiddling with a plate in his hands, then suddenly blurted it out. "Dad, I'm gay." I didn't respond the way a loving father should have. I froze. Tears came to my eyes almost immediately, not from anger, not from disappointment, but from fear. Pure, old, bitter fear. I muttered something, backed away, and locked myself in the bedroom for the rest of the night. Ethan must have thought I was disgusted with him, that I couldn't love him anymore. And that thought wrecks me. Because the truth is, I love that boy more than life itself. He's bright, funny, endlessly thoughtful, and sensitive in a way the world doesn't always understand. He's kind to strangers, sweet to his siblings, and always looks out for the underdog. I don't just love him, I admire him. My reaction wasn't about Ethan. It was about someone else. Someone I lost over 30 years ago. My baby brother. His name was Sam. He was 2 years younger than me and the best person I've ever known. Sam was my best friend, my secret keeper, my partner in crime growing up. We were inseparable. In the early 90s, when he came out at 17, it was like setting a fire in a room full of gasoline. People weren't kind. Not at school, not at church, not even at home. But Sam never apologized for who he was. He was proud. Quietly, bravely proud. And I was proud of him. I defended him against cruel jokes, against family members who told him to keep that stuff to himself. I told him I'd always have his back. And I meant it. One night, we stopped for snacks at a gas station outside of town. 3 guys saw us, saw him, and decided that the way he looked at them was some kind of threat. They cornered him outside. I tried to intervene, I really did. But I was 19 and scared, and by the time I got out of the car and yelled for help, they'd already started beating him. Sam ended up in the hospital with 2 broken ribs, missing teeth, and a twisted wrist. I remember sitting next to his hospital bed, holding his hand. I told him he was safe now, that it was over. I was wrong. He went home the next day. And that night, he took a bottle of painkillers and left a note. A note I still can't bring myself to finish reading. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But every time I see his handwriting, my chest seizes up and I just stop. The police caught one of the guys. Nothing happened. Small-town Nebraska didn't care that a gay teenager got beat half to death. They cared even less when he took his own life. It was brushed off. People whispered, called it a tragedy, and moved on. My parents? They barely flinched. In fact, I think some part of them was relieved. Like it solved a problem. I never forgave them. I haven't spoken to them since Sam's funeral. And now, 3 decades later, my son comes out to me, and all I could see was Sam. Not Ethan. Not this strong, kind, beautiful boy standing in front of me. Just Sam, bleeding in my arms. Sam, cold in a casket. I went right back to that night, to that pain, to that helplessness. And I cried like I haven't cried in years. But Ethan doesn't know any of this. He just knows that when he opened up to me, when he trusted me with the most personal truth he could share, I shut down. I locked myself away. He's been quieter since. More careful. I catch him watching me out of the corner of his eye, like he's waiting to see if I still love him. And that thought breaks me. Because I do. With every bone in my body. I love him, and I'm proud of him. I want to be the kind of father who makes him feel safe and celebrated, not afraid or ashamed. But I'm still trapped in my grief. I've never dealt with it properly. I packed it away in a box 30 years ago, sealed it tight, and threw it in the darkest corner of my mind. But now it's back. Ethan cracked it open with one honest, brave sentence. And I don't blame him for that. How could I? But the flood of emotion that's come out of that box, I don't know how to handle it. I want to sit him down and tell him everything. About Sam. About what happened. About why I reacted the way I did. But I'm terrified. What if I scare him? What if I make him feel like his life is going to follow the same path? What if I unload my trauma onto him when what he needs is reassurance, not inherited fear? Still, I know I have to do it. Because he deserves to know the truth. He deserves to know that my tears were not about him, but about what the world once did to someone I loved just as deeply. It's been 3 days since Ethan came out to me, and since I completely broke down. 3 days of carrying a grief I've spent 30 years trying to bury. 3 days of silence where there should have been comfort, reassurance, and love. And in those 3 days, I realized something that's shaken me to my core. I've spent my entire adult life trying to protect others from my pain by pretending it didn't exist. But all I really did was pass that pain forward, quietly, unknowingly, until it reached the person I wanted most to shield. I couldn't go on like that. I owed Ethan an apology. And not just some throwaway line. I owed him the truth. I owed him my story. My shame. My silence. All of it. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. So the first person I told was my wife. I sat her down in the kitchen after the kids were in bed. She looked at me with tired, worried eyes, like she'd been waiting for something to give. And I didn't know how to begin. The words wouldn't come out. So I pulled out my phone, opened the post I'd written, and handed it to her. I couldn't watch her read it. I just stared at the floor, hands clenched in my lap. When she finished, she didn't say anything at first. Just put her hand on my back and cried. Eventually, through the tears, she told me she had been on the verge of giving up. That she thought I'd changed, that I had become someone hardened, maybe even cruel. She admitted that the thought of divorce had crossed her mind, not out of spite, but because she couldn't make sense of the man I'd become. She said it felt like I didn't love our son anymore. Hearing that broke me all over again. I told her she wasn't wrong to think that I hadn't given her or Ethan any reason to feel otherwise. I explained what happened to Sam, the night he died, the guilt I carried, the silence I wrapped around myself like armor. I told her I had never dealt with it properly, that I'd buried my grief so deep it had warped how I responded to the people I loved most. She held me while I cried. And when I told her I needed to tell Ethan, she didn't hesitate. She said, "I'll be right there with you." I didn't want to just show Ethan the post. It didn't feel right. Too impersonal. Too detached, even if every word in it was raw and true. So, I decided to write him a letter. I sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours, pen in hand, unsure of how to start. My wife sat with me, her presence keeping me grounded. Eventually, I just let the words come out. Not polished, not perfect, just honest. I told him I was sorry, that the way I reacted when he came out had nothing to do with him and everything to do with my own fear. That I was so proud of him for having the courage to be himself, even when he didn't know how I'd respond. I told him I loved him deeply, unconditionally, and that I was ashamed for not showing it when he needed me the most. And then I told him about Sam. I told him who Sam was, his uncle, my baby brother, the kindest soul I'd ever known. I told him what happened, the violence, the hospital, the overdose, the letter he left behind that I still haven't finished reading. I told him how it shattered me, how I tried to pretend it hadn't happened so I could keep functioning, how I thought staying silent meant staying strong. But mostly, I told him that I saw his bravery and I saw his heart, and that I would never let my fear silence me again. That I would spend the rest of my life showing him how proud I am to be his father. We left the letter on his bed. Later that night, Ethan came into our room. He didn't say anything. He just walked over to me and threw his arms around my chest like he used to do when he was little. I cried again, but this time it was different. These weren't tears of grief. They were tears of release, of hope. He whispered, "I love you, Dad." And I told him, "I love you too. Always. There's still so much healing left to do."
For me.
For Ethan.
For our family.
I've already made an appointment with a therapist. I know this pain won't disappear overnight, and that I'll have to unpack years, decades, of hurt, guilt, and fear. But for the first time in a long time, I don't feel numb. I feel present. I feel alive. And I feel connected to my son again. And after I finished writing the letter to Ethan, I sat at the kitchen table in silence. My wife sat beside me the whole time, her hand resting lightly on my back. The envelope in front of me suddenly felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. I stared at it like it might disappear if I waited long enough. But I knew I had to give it to him. I owed him that much, more than that, really. I owed him the truth. I owed him myself. I walked down the hall to his room. He was laying on his bed, half watching something on his phone. When he noticed me in the doorway, he muted it and looked up. There was hesitation in his eyes, maybe even fear. Like he didn't know what version of me was going to walk through that door. I held out the letter and said, "I wrote something for you." I couldn't say it out loud. He took it without a word, just nodded, and I turned and left. Back in our room, I couldn't sit still. My wife tried to calm me down, but I kept pacing. My thoughts were racing. What if he didn't understand? What if I made it worse? What if I had already damaged him more than I knew? 15 minutes passed, then 20. I sat on the edge of the bed with my face in my hands, when suddenly I heard footsteps. Fast ones. Before I could even get up, Ethan burst through the door, already crying. Not silent tears. This was raw, messy, full-body crying. He clutched the letter in one hand and ran straight into my arms. I barely caught him before we both ended up on the floor. He buried his face into my chest and just kept saying, "I didn't know.
I didn't know about Uncle Sam. I didn't know any of that.
I'm so sorry, Dad.
I'm so sorry."
And then, the words that hit me harder than anything else. "I thought you hated me. I thought you didn't want me anymore." I lost it, right then and there. I held on to him as tight as I could, and just cried. I kept whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. I love you so much. You didn't do anything wrong." I felt my wife kneel beside us, wrapping her arms around both of us. The three of us just sat there on the floor, crying, holding on to each other like we were clinging to a lifeboat in the middle of a storm. I don't know how long we stayed like that, but eventually the tears slowed. Ethan sat back, still holding the letter. His eyes were red, his face puffy, but he gave me this soft look, one I hadn't seen in a long time. A look that said, "I see you now. And maybe, I forgive you," he said. "Thank you for telling me. I'm really proud to be your son." That moment broke something open in me. Something that's been closed off for years. Maybe decades. I told him I was proud of him. That coming out takes courage, not just because of the world, but because of how terrifying it can be to be vulnerable with the people you love the most. And I hadn't made that any easier for him. Later that night, we watched a movie together, just the two of us. It wasn't anything fancy, we barely paid attention to it, to be honest, but it felt huge. Sitting next to him on the couch, hearing him laugh, feeling the space between us finally begin to shrink, it was everything I didn't know I'd been missing. This morning, we made breakfast together.
He asked me about Sam.
Not just about what happened, but what he was like. And I told him. I told him how Sam used to sing badly, but with all his heart. How he'd walk 3 miles to return a library book just because he hated fines. How he gave the best hugs. I laughed and cried telling those stories. So did Ethan. And for the first time in decades, it felt okay to talk about Sam, not like a wound, but like a memory. There's still a long road ahead. I've booked my first therapy appointment for next week. I know it's going to be hard. I've carried my grief for so long, it's shaped how I see the world, how I parent, how I love, how I protect myself. But I'm done letting fear be my compass. I want to show up for my son. I want to be a man who leads with love, not silence. I want to give him the security I couldn't give Sam. And I want to forgive myself, someday, for the time I lost. Ethan hasn't let go of the letter since I gave it to him. I noticed it tucked in his sketchbook this morning. That feels like something. Like we're starting to rebuild. I don't expect it to be easy, but it's real. And real is enough for now. If you've read this far, thank you. I never expected writing down my story to bring such clarity. Grief doesn't just disappear, but I've learned that when we face it with honesty and love, it can soften enough to let light in. I'll never stop missing my brother. But I have a son who's here, who's brave, who's beautiful exactly as he is. And he needs me to be here too. So I will be. Fully, finally, and without fear.